I've worked in the recycling industry for over a decade. When I began, the buzz was all about zero waste. This focused on the linear goal of keeping waste out of landfill. No one much minded where it went, so long as it didn't cross a weighbridge. Exciting times! The ACT set the world's first big target in the 1990s, proudly painting no waste by 2010 on all the garbage trucks, presumably to promote their upcoming redundancy. Jurisdictions around Australia and the world followed up with their own zero waste targets. But no one has ever delivered on the promise of a waste-free society. The bold goal was partially effective. Between 1996 and 2010, ACT government worked with industry to create big new programs to recover big new waste tonnages. Recycling more than doubled. Waste to landfill dropped. Our population increased during that time, so the figures look even better on a per capita basis. But we never made it past 75% resource recovery. When I began working in waste management, government was being roasted by the critics for failing to deliver. 2010 rolled around, we hadn't eliminated waste, and we still needed those garbage trucks. So we quietly painted over the slogans. In the decades since, no one has set any bold goals and little progress has been made. Recycling has flatlined ever since. Was no waste by 2010 a failure? Well, that depends on what you mean. The target led to massive changes in waste management, like new construction and demolition recycling plants, transfer stations, tip-face sorting, and a huge green waste self-haul system. It took waste diversion from under 50% of total generation to around 75%. But this focus ignored the real problem with waste. Waste is increasing. In 2010, Canberra recycled 587,700 tonnes. That is more waste than Canberra generated in total in 1996. We might have met that no waste by 2010 target if total waste generation had remained steady. But it's not. Total waste generation is going up and up and up, and no government in the world has yet managed to tackle that fundamental problem. This is not a unique problem to the recycling sector. Every field of environmental management is struggling with the same issue. Increasing consumption means we are using more natural resources like water, minerals, land and energy. And we are generating more pollution like waste and greenhouse gas emissions. This same issue has caused climate change, habitat destruction, resource scarcity and the collapse of our natural systems. The problem is that we are stuck in a linear system. We dig stuff up, we make it into stuff to sell, and after that, it becomes waste. All of this commerce makes the magic line go up. Unit sales, profits, tonnages recovered. But it also makes other lines go up. Eventually, we're going to run off the page. We can't keep thinking in straight lines. We need to think in circles. Last year after I left government, I found myself chatting to a former colleague, Graham Mannell. Graham had helped author that bold no waste by 2010 strategy, and he'd since retired. He'd come up with a new idea to tackle a problem waste stream, and he was looking for a business partner. We were both new and distracted by other projects. I had a book to write and a baby to look after. Graham had his golf handicap. So it took us longer to pull together than it should have, but we managed to launch Send and Shred. Send and Shred is a secure shredding service for homes and small businesses. Customers buy a Send and Shred bag, fill it with confidential paperwork and lodge it in any post office. The bag and its contents are securely transported, shredded and recycled. The service replaces the home shredder. If you've ever cleared a paper jam, you know that home shredders are pretty awful to use. They're also incredibly wasteful. Shredded paper can't be recycled in material recovery facilities because the strips and the confetti get caught up in the machinery. If you shred at home and put it in a yellow-topped recycling bin, it ends up in landfill. Worse, the shredders themselves become e-waste, and they're not covered by any e-waste recycling scheme. Around 1.5 million home shredders end up as e-waste in Australian landfills every year. It's a poor product, it's unpleasant to use, and it leads to bad environmental outcomes. So between 2017 and 2020, Graham and I designed our packaging, set up our system, patented our method, did customer research, tested our price points, and set up an e-commerce. We've since sold the company, but it was quite a journey. Here are a few of the lessons I learned about the circular economy along the way. Now the first lesson is, don't step into the circle. The waste hierarchy begins with avoidance. But governments and industry rarely tackle avoidance because you can't boast about something that never happened and you can't sell nothing. Send and Shred is an avoidance scheme. Its first and proudest goal is to eliminate the home shredder. All those millions of bits of e-waste and the resources they represent, all that embedded emissions, all that energy, all the plastic and precious metals, that never needs to be consumed in the first place. This is one of the key reasons why services are often held up to be more environmentally friendly than products. In a capitalist economy, selling a service is one of the few ways you can make money without creating waste. The second lesson I learned is that you should draw the circle from the very beginning. Everyone in our company came from the recycling industry, so we were all committed to full resource recovery. We designed it in from the outset. Recycling the paper is simple. Our bags contain clean office whites, which are shredded, baled and sold to an Australian pulp mill and then turned back into new paper products. That's simple. We weren't affected by the China waste ban because our stream was so clean. But the packaging and logistics were harder to get right. Our original idea was that we wanted to sell a cardboard box in the post office. Customers would buy the box when they were running other errands, and that would mean no wasted transport emissions. They'd fill it up with paperwork, drop it back on their next trip, and the whole thing could be shredded and recycled. But this turned out to be impossible. Australia Post was not ready for a new shelf product like ours. We turned to e-commerce instead, and I was very glad of that when COVID hit. E-commerce was a good place to be during COVID. But that meant the extra freight emissions to deliver the product to our customer weren't really factored in. Australia Post provided us with expert design input, and that showed us that our cardboard box simply wouldn't work. They gave us a kitchen table test, which is very technical. This is how Australia Post tests out their products. If you can't chuck it over the kitchen table 10 times without it breaking, it's not strong enough to withstand postal handling. After testing out 50 different designs, we realised that a cardboard box, a thick paper satchel, or any of the other paper-based variations simply wouldn't work. They weren't strong enough to hold heavy loads of paper through the postal system, and we couldn't pack them down for easy shipping to our customers. So we ended up with an extremely strong self-sealing plastic bag. Our design is based on police evidence bags and bank coin bags, and it performs beautifully, but few people would consider a fossil fuel-based plastic to be environmentally friendly. We did the next best thing, and we set up a relationship with plastics recycler, Plastic Forests in Albury. They handle all the red cycle plastic bags from Coles and from other programs, and that system is a really good complement to our paper shredding. This means that everything in the bag, including the bag itself, is recycled. We also wanted to make the bags out of recycled plastic, but when we commissioned our first run, the factory couldn't produce a strong enough product for it without using virgin material. I'm hopeful that in future production that company will crack the problem and manage to use recycled plastic that they then get recycled at the end of life. And that's getting pretty close to a good circular system. The third lesson I learned was include the full circle. While running Send and Shred, I embarked on another project called the Carbon Diet. I cut my carbon footprint and that of the average Australian by 75%, 1 week at a time. I learned carbon accounting for that, and I was horrified to see the impact of freight emissions on our overall footprint and consumption. Large, efficient deliveries by truck, rail and sea generate really low emissions per product. But small-scale delivery using fossil fuel cars or vans is very carbon intense, and air freight is the devil. E-commerce relies on all of these carbon-intense delivery methods, so our increasing trend to shop online is actually making matters worse. I flinch every time I see an environmental product ordered online from an overseas vendor because it flies into Australia. And those products that require you to make a specialist car trip to buy it or to return the packaging, they're not that environmentally friendly, no matter how much they rely on second-hand, recycled, all-natural stuff. Send and Shred isn't too bad on this metric. The delivery chain relies on slow, efficient postal delivery and there's no air freight involved. The increasing electrification of our transport system will actually help out even more. Once we've got all of our freight travelling in really efficient trains or on low emissions or zero emissions buses, we have to worry about this much less. But the carbon footprint of our freight logistics is huge. It's poorly understood and it's rarely factored in by governments and industry. Now, the fourth lesson I learned is that capitalism hates circles. Our Send and Shred sales took a while to climb, which is what happens when your CEO and Chief Sales Officer, me, is die-hard greenie who thinks no one should buy anything ever. But eventually our sales did climb, to the point where we managed to sell the company with that magic startup feature, a chart with a line going up. I still feel conflicted about this. I'm hoping steps 1, 2 and 3 mean that any environmental damage is made up for by the environmental benefits we've brought. But the experience has forever marked me. Our world says more is better and growth equals success. Everything about business and the startup community confirms this. We are still pushing lines when we know we need to draw circles. I'm now a member of the ACT Greens Labor government. I'm also the Greens crossbench spokesperson for the circular economy, and we have a lot of work to do. I'm pleased to say that the government's Minister for Waste understands the problems we need to face. We've started a food waste reduction program and we have municipal food waste recovery on the horizon. We've got some other small schemes planned. We use the phrase circular economy as often as possible, but fundamentally we are still stuck in that linear economy, and it's made little progress over the last 10 years. I'm hoping to take what I've learned about circles and find out more from industry, locals and government. Let's see if over the next 10 years we can start drawing that circle.